3 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. As you look around, and God made that, and God made that, and God made that. Everything God made, right? You believe that God made everything, right? And that means God made every type of person there is, too, right? Which means that God made the wrestlers.
Yes, he did.
And if God made the wrestlers, then it would only make sense that the wrestlers would believe in God. Pastor Chris Whaley is on the phone. Boy, that was an awkward intro, wasn't it? Pastor Chris Whaley is going to talk to us about his book called The Masked Saint. It's a memoir. He had been a wrestler. He is the legacy adult pastor of First Baptist Church of Orlando. He's a former professional wrestler who competed in Florida using the ring name The Saint. And his book that we're going to talk about, The Masked Saint, is something I think it was Joe and Patsy who watched the movie, right?
Yes, they did.
So they made a movie about this, and they fell in love with it and asked Robin if she would figure out a way to talk to Pastor Whaley. So we have him on the phone because Robin knows how to do magic. And so we're going to talk about that. Also, it says here there's another a Christmas story that he wrote that will be made into a Hallmark Channel movie. So that's kind of exciting as well. Good morning, Pastor Chris Whaley. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Brother, if I was any better, I would have to wipe some of it off.
Well, good. What is on your face on this cover of the book? What is that?
I don't know. It depends upon which book you have.
It looks like your face is covered in a white mask. That's what that is, right?
Yeah, but that's the book that was published in 2007, and the book was republished and came out back on January the 8th of this year, and it has a whole lot better picture on it. So if you go to Amazon, you can see that picture, and I prefer that one over the one you have. But the story is still the same. The story is still the same.
So tell me about the. Can I ask you about your life? Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Auburndale, Florida,
okay,
which is a couple hours from Ocala. And my wife is from Plant City. I'm from Auburndale. We are true Floridians. This is the native tongue, what you're listening to.
So as a child, let me ask two questions and you answer them both together, I guess. Were you a church child? Like, did your mom and dad, were you raised in the church, as people say? And were you also a wrestling child? Were you always constantly infatuated with wrestlers?
No, actually, my mom grew up in a cult, and she had a lot of questions growing up and was never allowed to ask questions because she was in a cult. But when my family, my mom and dad were in South Alabama at the time, and they moved to Central Florida. And when they moved here, a pastor was just out knocking on doors one day, and when he knocked on our door, my mom said, I've been praying for somebody like you for a long time.
Really?
She invited him in, and he answered her questions, and before he left, she prayed and asked Christ to come into her heart. So she was the beginning of the spiritual heritage, and then she made me start going to church, which I didn't really appreciate whenever it first began, but I had to do it because she was my mom. But I was also a very sickly child. I was in and out of hospitals constantly, mostly with pneumonia. In the fourth grade, I had polio and viral encephalitis, and so I couldn't participate in sports. But when I was in the hospital, I watched a lot of professional wrestling, and I just loved it. I mean, I grew up watching Eddie Graham and the Great Malenko, and a guy that lives in your city, Dory Funk Jr.
Okay.
And they were the best, and so I grew up watching them, and that was really my favorite sport whenever I was growing up, is watching wrestling.
So that became that was like rock and roll to you. A lot of kids, or like NFL to you. I mean, that was the thing that made you move. I mean, that was the thing that motivated you, right? Was the wrestling?
Oh yeah. I just loved it. If I could get my dad to take me to Tampa, I felt like Christmas every time I got to go there. It was wonderful.
So going back to your mom's prayers, as she's in a cult, she must have said this cult, and you didn't define the cult, and you don't have to, but I'm just guessing that somebody who's questioning what they're being told is probably saying, "There's got to be something else. This can't be true. Send me somebody." So she prays for somebody, and he shows up, and literally changes you and your mom first, and then you. Did he change your father also? Was your father in the cult?
No, he was not, and he really wasn't crazy about going to church. But the pastor of that church was just an awesome guy. My dad was a long-distance truck driver and a fifth-degree redneck.
Oh, my.
So when that pastor came around, my dad was not thrilled, but the guy would not go away. He would stand there and talk to him while my dad was working on his truck. He took my dad fishing. He just became a friend to him, and my dad began going to church. And then when I was a teenager, my dad became a Christian, and that was one of the things that convinced me of the reality of God, is that if God could save that man, he could save anybody.
The book that we're focusing on, your memoir, I'm guessing that the questions I'm asking you are in the book. And just forgive me, I don't have the book, so that's why I don't know the answers. But even if I did, I'd like the listeners to hear these things.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So all right. So we kind of have a background to yourself. So the hospital stay is kind of really what catapulted you into the world of wrestling.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Right.
So what did you do once you started feeling better? How do you get into wrestling? I mean, do you just join a gym?
Oh.
How do you do that?
No. Oh, no. I had a wonderful, godly doctor in Winter Haven. His name was Raymond LaRue, and he refused to let me give up. When they found out what was causing all of my sicknesses, it was my allergies. I was allergic to over 200 things. And they started, they put me on the allergy medication, which I took until I was a junior in college. But once I started on that allergy medication, I started putting on weight. And this doctor got me going to the gym and working out, and I just loved it. I love working out in the gym. And so my wife and I graduated from college, came back to Central Florida, and she was teaching high school math at her alma mater. And I was looking for God's direction as to where to go. And one day I was looking in the Tampa Tribune. This is back in 1978. And I was looking in the Tampa Tribune, and it said wanted professional wrestlers. I quickly went over to my wife and showed her the ad, and she looked up and rolled her eyes. And kept reading the papers. And so I put a bag together with some, gym clothes in it, tennis shoes, and I drove over to Tampa, and I walked in, and there was the great Malenko. And so the great Malenko is the one who trained me, and he's trained a lot of guys. He's not with us anymore. He passed away several years ago, but he was a great teacher, and he's the one that taught me to wrestle. And I got into wrestling in 1978, and I wrestled until 1988. My last 3 years that I wrestled, I was in seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I wrestled. I was in seminary in the daytime, and then I wrestled at night.
Okay.
And wrestled until I graduated in 1988 and came to Florida to my first church.
Help me understand what the wrestling looked like. There are two visions in my head. One that looks like Hulk Hogan's type of wrestling, and the other one that looks like what you would see at a high school wrestling match. Which one did it look most like?
Well, it looked more like the Hulk Hogan.
It did. So there was there was an element of showbiz in it.
Well, there better be something that's going to grab the crowd. And, professional wrestling is very, very popular today. I mean, Vince McMahon, when he took over the WWF, which is now the WWE, when he took it over, he is a marketing genius. And so it shut down all of the little territories throughout the United States because no one could compete with national TV, which is what he ended up having with the USA and NBC. And so if you turn the TV on just about any night, you're going to find wrestling on. It's very, very popular.
So, and the only reason I'm asking you that is because in addition to being a good wrestler, you therefore, it sounds like you had to understand at least take somebody's advice, how to take your skill and make it a show and not just completely about the sport.
Yeah. Well, they do the same thing in football and basketball and golf and everything else.
Sure, that's true.
I mean, they, those guys are going to do something to get themselves noticed, and that's why, the big names in each one of those sports are the people that were noticed because of, the way they played their sport or the way they acted after their sport or whatever. But there was always something that kind of drew attention to it.
How did your friends react during your last 3 years when you were in seminary, knowing that you're wrestling but you have this other profession that's near and dear to your heart, your passion?
Right. Oh, it was a hoot. It really was. There's just not a lot of professional wrestlers who are also studying to be pastors. Not a big group of us. So it gave me so many opportunities to speak. Whenever I wasn't wrestling, I was speaking to either to youth functions or banquets or whatever. And I loved doing that. So it gave me so many opportunities that normally I would not have had. And you find out how many closet wrestling fans there are. And there were 4,000 students there at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I found out that there were a lot, even professors that loved professional wrestling. And so they wanted to know all they could, and most of them came to see the matches, and it was a great experience.
Well, when you turn out to be in that capacity, you turn into a role model, and that's a lot of responsibility. Do you feel you've been able to help young people that might have gone down a not so good path to keep them on the straight and narrow, to believe in themselves?
Well, I sure hope I do. One of the people have asked me, what do you hope comes out of the movie? And I said, well, there's two things. One of them is that I hope that the church gets up off of the sideline and gets into the battle, because there's a lot of people being abused that need help. And for so long, we've kind of sat on our blessed assurance and done absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. So I hope that they, will get into the game. But the other thing is that we serve the God of a second chance, and I've been that recipient. And there's a lot of young people out there that feel, even in a short lifetime, that they have messed up so badly that there's no way that a loving God would accept them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to give them the good news that we serve the God of a second chance and a third and a fourth.
Yeah,
and a fifth.
absolutely. Yeah.
I have been on the receiving end of that, and so I think there's a lot of people that are looking for that message, that there's still hope. And I just pray that churches would be more receptive. Unfortunately today in some churches, we're more concerned about taking other people's church members than we are reaching the people that need to hear the message. And so I hope that they are receptive to the hurting people that come into their doors.
Pastor Chris Whaley is on the phone. Are you in Orlando right now?
I am. I'm sitting here in the office at First Baptist Orlando.
And we're talking about his life and also his book, The Masked Saint, which is also a movie, right? Am I right about the title? The movie's got the same title as the book, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
The Masked Saint. Yes.
And you were the Masked Saint as a wrestler. And do you ever go into wrestling mode when you're up at the pulpit?
Well, you know what? You can certainly you can certainly get in that mode real quickly whenever you've been a professional wrestler.
That's
yes,
funny. Well, let me take a little break and we'll be right back. We have Robin, maybe you can remember his name. Here in Marion County, there's a gardening store called Kenny's Place, mm-hmm. and they help handicapped kids learn how to. How to learn. And there's a guy there who was a former professional wrestler, Mad Max or something? Mad Eddie like or something?
That. I can't recall his name.
Does that name ring a bell for you? He's got a background in wrestling also, and he's very, very much into helping out people. I don't know that he's gone into the ministry, but I think in a way he's got a ministry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I I don't know the name. There's not a lot of guys around that were wrestling whenever I was in it. I wrestled the Undertaker, and he's about one of the very few that's still working every now and then.
Do you still keep in touch with Dory Funk?
No, I haven't talked to Dory in a long, long time. He was absolutely the best wrestler of all time.
He works here. He does a lot of things to help with the veterans. He's very much involved with the veterans community. Him and his wife.
Yeah. Well, they are great people, and I sure miss them, but I don't get to talk to them.
Well, maybe they're hearing this. Maybe they'll hear you say this and reconnect with you. Let me take a little break, and we'll be right back. This is a fascinating interview. Chris Whaley, Pastor Chris Whaley. We'll be back with Pastor Chris Whaley in just a bit.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. Wednesday will be a partly sunny, warm day with a high of 84 along the coast, 89 inland. Mainly clear Wednesday night, lows in the low to mid-60s inland, 69 at the beaches. Thursday, sunshine mixing with clouds, breezy in the afternoon, the high 82 on the coast, 87 inland. For Friday, partly sunny and becoming breezy with a shower or thunderstorm in spots, especially in the afternoon, the high 83 to 87. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Since 1916, a lot of independent agents have recommended auto owners insurance, and a lot of parents have taken that recommendation to heart. So have a lot of their children, and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. As we celebrate our first 100 years, Auto Owners Insurance thanks all those who have put their trust in us, and all the generations who will.
Call George Mangan Insurance in Ocala today, 352-732-3191.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
Most planes get a set of freshly washed blankets and pillows for the first flight of the day. After that, they're folded up, they're reused. Babies consistently cried less when their father was close by compared to when dad was absent, and that response was observed even in the delivery room. Try to stick to your usual sleep and wake times as much as possible, even on the weekends. Your waistline and your heart are going to thank you.
Intelligence for your life on the John Tesh Radio Show. Don't miss this stuff.
Stay informed on everything going on in the villages with the Village Spectator newspaper. The Village Spectator is exclusively devoted to the villages with news, commentary, and more. And yes, they have Tom's Picks, a free referral for people who are looking for a company to do work for them. Tom's Picks will refer the company that fits your needs, and all we ask is that you tell them where you heard about them. Call Tom's Picks at 804-1223 and pick up your copy of the Village Spectator today.
Now read Ocala Downtown newspaper online.
Veterans are the foundation upon which our freedom is built. Listen to The Source, WOCA, each Thursday at 9 a.m. to Veterans News with Hank Whittier from Vets Helping Vets. You'll hear tributes, information on veterans issues, and stories that will make you laugh, cry, and feel proud. Veterans News always focuses on the military, past and present, and on our first responders. Veterans News is brought to you each week by Bob Wine's Camellia Gardens and Nursery, keeping you blooming since 1952.
Need a mailbox rental but need more information? Remember, Personal Service Center, 789-6683. How does $10 a month sound with just a 3-month commitment? Remember, Personal Service Center, 789-6683. Mention WOCA and the setup fee is waived. Personal Service Center will email or text notifications to you when your packages arrive. Even scan mail so you never actually have to pick it up. Now that's service. Personal Service Center, 789-6683. Located on the corner of Northeast 25th Avenue and 24th Street, Ocala. Look for the yellow signs.
All right. Good interviews go so quickly. Pastor Chris Whaley is on the phone. We've only got about 3 minutes left. You know what I did during the break, Pastor? I looked up in the Bible to see where the word wrestling is ever mentioned. And I'm sure you know this. It says that it was Genesis 32:22 through 32, and it says that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak.
Right.
I guess the man who wrestled with him was actually God, right? Isn't that how that goes?
Or an angel of God.
Or an angel of God, yeah.
I love that story. I've preached from that story several times.
So what happened internally 7 years into wrestling that made you decide to join take the seminary?
Well, I had felt called into the ministry for a long time, and I had a bad experience when I was a youth pastor, and just really became a little bit hurt and disillusioned, but yet God never gave up on me, and He continued to allow me to heal. And then when I reached that point where I had healed, He got my attention and said, "You need to be doing what I've called you to do." And so one night we were living in our dream home in Lakeland, Florida. We were living in our dream home. I made more money than I'd ever made in my life, and one night we went for a walk, and I told my wife, I said, I really need to get back to doing what God called me to do. And she said, well, I've just been waiting for you to say it. And so we sold the home, loaded up, and moved to Fort Worth, and I finished seminary and have not stopped since that time.
30 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Wow.
And been married to that woman for 41 years.
Wow.
Oh, congratulations.
Wow. I love your story. So the book is called The Masked Saint. What was it like when a filmmaker came to you and said, we'd like to make a movie out of your book?
Well, it was actually a long process. They started talking to me within a year after my book was first published, and it grew all very quickly because they string you along, and then they change their mind and string you along, and then another one comes along. And so I had actually put it on the shelf and said, one day my grandkids can get it off the shelf and say, hey, look what Grandpa wrote. But February of 2013, I got a call from a producer, and he said, has anybody done anything with your book? And we were on the phone, so I rolled my eyes and said no. and then 2 weeks later, he called me and he said, we're going to make your book into a movie.
Wow.
And I was dumbfounded. And so they filmed it in November of 2013, and then it was released nationwide back in January.
Wow.
January the 8th, it was released nationwide, and then in Canada later on that month.
Well,
So,
Pastor, thank you so much for being on the air with us. I'm sorry to cut you short, but we are out of time.
No problem.
I loved the conversation. Go to themaskedsaint.com, go to firstorlando.com, and Pastor Whaley, thank you so much for being on with us today. This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio, I'm Carmen Roberts. The Taliban's new leader in Afghanistan says no way to peace talks.
The insurgents have picked Mullah Haibullah Akhundzada as their new commander. In a statement, the Taliban also confirming Mullah Akhtar Mansour's death.
Mansour died last week in a U.S. drone attack, and now the Taliban's on the attack in Kabul.
Afghanistan's foreign ministry says a suicide bomber targeted a minibus carrying court employees.
Fox's Jessica Gallagher. Whether you call it a protest or a riot, emotions running high at yesterday's Donald Trump rally in New Mexico. And inside, more protest.
Protesters interrupted Donald Trump repeatedly during the rally, holding up signs that said Trump is fascist before he called for security.
Bring him home to mom. Go home to mommy.
Fox's Tanya J. Powers reporting, and Wall Street opens higher. Fox News, we report, you decide.
A Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's